Adam here from the Digital Goja Showroom. We got the top 15 questions on the Sony A7R III just after this. Hey, so today we're going to go over the top 15 questions on the Sony A7R III. This camera came out just at the end of October of last year, so only a few months ago. We got a very professional camera over here, 42 megapixel dual SD card slot, 10 frames per second, 4K video recording, extremely good dynamic range, but a lot of customers that are interested in this camera have tons of questions, so I'm going to go over those questions that we're getting in customer service for you on this video today. So let's start out with question number 1. So for any new camera that's coming out today, whether it's from Sony, Canon, Nikon, Panasonic, a lot of video shooters are requesting at least the camera to do 120 frames per second in 1080. Now, certain cameras do crop it when shooting in 120 frames per second. So the question is, does the A7R III crop when recording in 120 frames per second? No, it doesn't. It actually uses the full width of the sensor. So take a look at some of the sample footage. I'll show you between 60 frames per second and 120 frames per second. So another question that we get is, what is the max ISO when recording video? When recording video, you have an ISO of 100 all the way up to 32,000. But if you're going to record photos, you can go all the way up to 102,400. Again, in video, you're limited to 32,000 ISO, and that's where it tops out. All right, let's move on to the next question. So the A7S II is still Sony's flagship low light monster. That thing just gobbles up photons, and it performs extremely well under low light. So a lot of people had a question: how does the A7R III compare to the A7S II in similar lighting conditions? Let's go over to the studio and take a look at the comparison between the A7R III and the A7S II. Hey guys, so I'm in the studio right now. We're going to go through the different ISOs between the A7R III and the A7S II, just as a comparison so you can get a feel of the difference. We're going to turn off all the lights. We'll show you an image of how it looks to the human eye, and then we'll go ahead and show a side-by-side comparison of the different ISOs starting at around 800. So this is going to be at 800 ISO, 1/60th of a second f2.8. So now we're at 1600 ISO, 1/60th of a second, f2.8. So now we're at 3200 ISO, similar shutter speed and aperture, 60th of a second, f2.8. And remember, we have no lights in the studio turned on, just whatever available light is hitting from around the showroom. ISO 6400. Now we are at 12,800, same settings, same shutter speed, aperture setting, and again, high ISO noise reduction is turned off. So now we are at 25,600 ISO. Okay, so we've reached a peak at ISO 32,000 on the A7R III, and you can see it compared to the A7S II. We're not going to show all the ISOs because on the A7S II you can go up to 100,000 ISO, and it's not a fair comparison because we can't do that. We can't push that with the A7R III. But here is your comparison. I hope that helped you out, and let's go to the next question. Another common question that we have is, how does the color science in terms of the skin tones compare to that of the Canon? So let's take a look at the new Sony A7R III, which has an improved color science over the previous version. And let's see how it compares with some standard settings compared to a camera like the 5D Mark IV. So let's go to the studio and we'll do a side-by-side comparison so you can be the judge of how the A7R III fares compared to Canon's color science. So in this comparison, we're comparing the A7R III and the 6D Mark II. Right now you can see Izzy with the 6D Mark II in his hand, but you'll see a side-by-side comparison. Both are going to be, the white balance is going to set to auto, the standard, it's going to use a standard picture profile and similar ISO of 200, 60th of a second f2.8 in the same lighting condition, so you can get an idea of the skin tones representation. We might have to tweak the exposure just because each sensor is a little bit different. But again, here is a test between the Sony camera and a Canon camera. So are you someone that needs the camera to focus well under low light and you're just concerned or you haven't pulled the trigger on buying the A7R III? Well, let's take a look. I can tell you this camera focuses really well under low light, but don't take my word for it. Let's take a look at how well it does. I'll show you right now. Okay, so now we have Izzy standing in front of the Sony A7R III. We have the 5D Mark IV showing you how bright it is in the scene. You can see that the lighting is very low. So we're going to test the AF on the Sony A7R III, and as you can tell, it's already been able to find Izzy's face with no problem. And we're going to do eye detection as well. As you can see, it has no problem finding Izzy's eye, whether it's the left eye or the right eye. And and we can shoot even in the frames. You can see that the IAF works as well, and this is low light. So there you have it. The A7R III is a beast when photographing under low light. So has Sony improved the buffer on the camera from the previous version? Yes, they have. So the A7R III now has a UHS 2 compliant card slot. That means you get faster read and write speeds. Also, the image processor has been improved. So you get about approximately 28 uncompressed raw files at 10 frames per second, or you can do about up to 76 compressed raw or JPEG files shooting on the A7R III at 10 frames per second. So can you change the electronic viewfinder's brightness level from automatic to a manual brightness level? Yes, you can. And the reason why Sony has the auto brightness level is it will automatically adjust the brightness according to the lighting situation that you're in. But you can change that to manual. Let's go and I'll show you how to change that in the menu setting of the camera. So to check the brightness or to adjust the brightness of the electronic viewfinder, what you're going to do is you're going to access the menu. Once the menu is activated, you're going to go to where it says Setup 1. And it's on the first page. You'll see monitor brightness, then comes the viewfinder brightness. What you're going to do is it's going to tell you that you're going to have to look through the viewfinder and adjust the brightness of the viewfinder and change it from manual brightness to auto, either auto or manual brightness through looking through it. So unfortunately, I can't show you exactly what the menu will look like, but remember it's in this menu option to adjust and switch from manual to auto. So another common question we have on the Sony A7R III, since it has 2 SD card slots, is how do you configure your multi-SD card workflow on the A7R III? Let's take a look at the menu setting on how to set that up to be able to choose which card is going to handle your video recording or how it's going to transfer from card to card on the camera. It's all within the menu. Again, let's jump to the studio and let's take a look at how to do that on the camera. So the question was, how do you set up a multi-card workflow? And to set it up, you're going to access the menu. This is new to Sony because this is one of the first Sonys to have 2 memory cards besides the A9. So you're going to hit the menu button. You're going to go into the setup menu, which we're in right now, and you're going to scroll all the way to page 6. And once you're in page 6, then you have your record media settings. And you're going to have a variety of options to choose from. So the first option right over here, you're getting prioritize record media. And basically what you're telling the camera is the card in slot 1 will be your main card, or the card in slot 2 will be your main card. Remember, if you choose the main card as slot 2, but you only have a card in slot 1, you're going to have to go back and change it in the menu. So let's see some of the other options. So once you select your priority card, you're going to go to recording mode. Now you have all your different recording modes, like the standard, which will basically record to one card, and then once the card is done, it will go switch over to the next card. You can record photos simultaneously on your priority card and your secondary card. You can do the same for videos in simultaneous. And you can also do simultaneous photos and video to each card. And then you can also do sort your RAW and JPEG. So depending on which is your priority card, you'll get RAW and you'll get JPEG on the secondary, or you'll get JPEG on your primary card and RAW on your secondary card. Then you can also do it where it sorts the photos and the video. So does the A7R III feature a customizable spot metering point? Yes, it does. And why is this important? It's important because it allows you to frame your shot and choose the area that you want to do the spot metering at. That way you don't have to recompose the image or push your exposure lock button. So let's take a look at how to configure that in the camera's menu. Okay, so to align the spot metering point with your focus point, what you're going to want to do is access the menu. And in the menu, you're going to make sure that it's in number 1, and you're going to go all the way over till you see exposure 2, and that's page 10 of 14, and you're going to see where it says spot metering point. Select that. Now you can change it from the default, which would be center, to focus point link. And now you are ready to go. Your spot metering point will be aligned with your focusing point. So does the IAF work without depressing the shutter release button? No, you actually have to program what custom button will activate the IAF. Now, the IAF isn't a new feature to the A7R III, but it's a feature that has been greatly advanced from the previous model. Now you can work with it in continuous mode up to 10 frames per second. By default, the IAF is set to the back button that's by the mode wheel, and you have to push that button and press the shutter release button to activate the IAF feature on the Sony A7R III. Let's take a look at see how you configure that on the camera. Okay, so by default, the IAF button activation is right over here. As I stated, the IAF won't activate unless a button is pressed, but you can customize where it is. So if you don't want the button to be in the middle, what you do is you hit the menu, go into custom key. Once you've hit the custom key button, then you can use any of these custom buttons. For instance, the multi-selector button, you can change to IAF, which I have set right now. You select that, and now when you point the camera at your subject matter, you got to remember you have to push the button in to activate the IAF. Only face detection will activate when you point the camera at your subject matter. So can you switch between NTSC and the PAL format? And the answer is yes, you can. This is not a region-locked camera. So if you're shooting for something in Europe or you're shooting something in the Americas, you can switch between the NTSC and the PAL setting. Typically with NTSC, you're going to get shutter speeds in video mode as 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. In the PAL, you're going to get 25 frames per second, 30 frames per second, and 50 frames per second. But you want to make sure that it's set up before you start recording. So let's take a look at how you would switch between NTSC and PAL within the camera's menu. In order to switch from PAL to NTSC or from NTSC to PAL, what you're going to want to do is enter your menu. Once you're in the menu, you're going to go over to your setup menu. You're going to go to setup 2, and in setup 2 you're going to see in page 2 of 7 you're going to go over to NTSC or PAL. Now once you're changing modes, the camera is going to have to reboot, so you're going to have to just give it time to do the selection. So you can hit enter, and once it reboots you're going to be in the PAL mode. And the way you can tell is if you hit the menu and you go all the way up, you can go to your record settings, and you'll see that instead of 60p, 24p, and 30p, what you're going to have is 50p, 25p, and 100p. In NTSC, for the high frame rate, you're going to get 120p, but again in PAL you're going to see 100p. So that's how you know that you're in the PAL setup. If you want to go back, again, you do the same thing over. What you're going to want to do is probably, to be able to record in NTSC, you're going to want to make sure the card is formatted. I would particularly have a couple different cards with me if I was going to shoot jobs in different modes. But that's how you change from NTSC to PAL, or from PAL to NTSC. How well does the IAF work in video recording? Well, simple answer, it doesn't. You don't have access to IAF for video recording. You do have the ability to do face detection, but IAF is strictly for the photo mode. So a lot of people that walk into the showroom that are interested in the A7R III are asking, and a lot of people online, is it worth purchasing the VGC3 EM battery grip for the A7R III? Now, Sony has improved the battery life with the new FZ100 battery. Get about 2.2 times the capacity of the FW50 battery. But is it worth getting the vertical grip? Well, I'd say if you're shooting sports, if you're shooting wildlife, even if you're a portrait photographer, I would go for purchasing the battery grip. One, it's going to improve the ergonomics of the camera. If you're going to use longer, heavier lens, it makes it easier to hold. And if you're going to want to extend your battery life, if you shoot time-lapse photos, if you're shooting video, it's a great accessory to have in your arsenal. And when you're shooting portraits like I'm doing right now, you're not going to have to do kind of the reach around. You can get the shutter release right over here, so it's a bit more comfortable for a long day of shooting. So yes, I say it's an important accessory to have. I say go for it and purchase the VGC3 EM vertical grip for the A7R III. So a lot of people that do long exposures, time lapse, they're recording video, they're looking for a way to extend the battery life. So not only do you have the vertical grip for the camera, but a lot of people ask, can you power the camera with an external battery? And yes, you can. So if you have a large USB type battery pack, you can use the USB plug that has the multi-interface, the multi-terminal port in the camera to charge the battery while you're using the camera. And in the menu, you want to make sure that the feature is turned on. So charge via USB is activated in the camera. Let's go into the menu so I can show you where you can turn that feature on. To be able to power the camera using a USB power supply, what you're going to want to do is go into your menu. In your setup menu, you're going to go to setup 4, which is 4 of 7, and you're going to go to USB power supply, and you're going to want to make sure that it's selected and turned on. And that's it. And then you'd be able to power the A7R III, especially when you're out shooting time lapses with an external power device like a USB power supply. So if you're stepping up from a camera like the A6500 and you're used to getting a little bit more reach out of that 70-300, and you've purchased the A7R III, a lot of people ask, can you switch in between the full frame and the Super 35 or APS-C mode on the Sony A7R III? And yes, you can. You can assign it to a custom button, so it's very quick and easy to access. Let's take a look at how you would do that on the camera's menu. So to switch between the full frame and the APS-C mode, what you could do is you can go into the setup menu, and you have the option right here to switch between APS-C and Super 35 shooting, whether or not it's auto or manual. But if you want to assign it to a custom key, what you're going to want to do is go into the setup menu too, and then you're going to scroll over to where you're going to see the custom setting menu, the custom keys, and in the custom key, you can select for photo or for video, and then you go to custom button 1, and you're going to go all the way over where you see APS-C and Super 35 full frame format selector. So once that's selected, that's the custom button 1. If you push that, you're gonna notice that in the image that angle of view is going to be narrower. So you won't have to go through the menu and change it. Now you can just hit custom key 1 and you switch between the full frame mode and the Super 35. Hey, so I hope I've answered all your questions regarding the A7R III. I know there's a ton more, and if I haven't answered all of your questions, you know, there's a comment section below. Leave them down below and I'll get to them. And also, like this video if it helped you out, and subscribe to our channel for future amazing videos such as this one. And remember, if you're in the Miami area, come say hello to Izzy and me at the Digital Goja showroom. I'll catch you in the next video.